Welcome to tonight's tale, a fairy tale theater podcast. We are reviewing every episode of Shelley Duvall's Fairy Tale Theater in alphabetical order. I am your host, Emily, from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm joined by my co-host, Eric.
Hi, I'm Eric from New York.
And this week we are joined by our guest host, Doug.
Hi, I'm Doug from Perth, Western Australia.
And we're very happy to have Doug joining us while we review and recap the episode Hansel and Gretel. Doug, I'm going to start with you. How did you first discover fairy tale theater?
Well, I've been a fan of fairy tale theatre for as long as I can remember. I was born in 1983, and in Australia, we got fairy tale theatre on video in 1984. So I probably would have been about 2 or 3 years old when my family was renting them, and I was watching with my sister, who was a few years older than me. Hansel and Gretel is actually the first episode I have a vivid memory of seeing, and also just being in love with the cover art from a very young age. So, yeah, I've really grown up with fairy tale theatre. I've never stopped loving it.
Aw, same.
So Hansel and Gretel premiered on December 5th, 1983. It was actually season 2, episode 6. Yeah, it's one of the earlier episodes. It was in the second season. So this is towards the very beginning of fairy tale theater.
Excellent. So what are the first things that spring to mind when you think of the episode Hansel and Gretel? Eric?
For me, I think automatically of Dame Joan Collins.
Same.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, this was in the heyday of her being the star of Dynasty, of her being Alexis.
I always say you can just imagine how much of a big deal this would have been for people back in 1983, because they'd grown to love-hate Alexis on Dynasty, seeing her as this like glamorous rich bitch, and here she is in like peasant garb and in full witch makeup. I reckon this must have been a huge deal today.
I think you're right. And also, she just seemed to be having a ball with it. I get the feeling she loved putting on all that witch's makeup and playing a character so different. She's so beautiful. This is a real character, and she's so beautiful.
She's really good as the witch. She's really good.
Yeah. She was nominated for a couple awards for this performance, I believe.
Yeah, I got a lot of attention.
So, yeah, I'm the same. When I wrote in my notes, what's the first thing that springs to mind? Joan Collins. That's all I wrote.
And if we talk about the other cast, we've got Ricky Schroeder as Hansel. Yeah. He was 12 when they filmed this, and you've got little Bridget Anderson as Gretel. She was 7.
Oh, she was tiny.
Oh, yeah, gorgeous little thing. And he was big, I believe, for like Silver Spoons, and he was in a film called The Champ in the late 70s. So he had a bit of a name as a child actor. And people always say that he was the Macaulay Culkin of the early 80s.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that. And I knew he was the bigger star. You said he got top billing over Joan Collins.
That's right. So, yeah, when the credits roll, it starts with Ricky Schroeder, then Joan Collins. I'm sure she really likes that.
Yeah. I'm sure to this day, Ricky Schroeder is proud of that.
Oh, yeah. That one time he topped Joan Collins. And we also have Paul Dooley to round out the cast as the woodcutter.
And he had already appeared in the episode Rumpelstiltskin. He played the miller in that episode. And he's another one of the Popeye alumni that we see throughout the series.
Oh, yeah. Now, we'll talk about his magnificent beard when we see him as well.
And little Bridget Anderson, I was familiar with her. I don't know if anyone else was. I remember her from Savannah Smiles, and I grew up watching The Parent Trap Part 2. She's
I did see those after I saw Hansel and Gretel. Yeah.
This was one I could not find for a long time. So by the time I did see it, I already knew who Bridget Anderson was.
Well, you remember I said that I remember seeing this when I was very young.
Yeah.
And my family moved shortly after that, and the new video library that we were a member of did not have Hansel and Gretel. And I think my family have memories of me just being really frustrated, wanting to find this video. As a kid, you have limited resources, especially in the late 80s, early 90s. And it was years before I was able to find a copy that I could watch again. And that was just as good as I remembered.
Yeah. Half of the joy of fairy tale theater was the hunt of finding the episodes. And this was one I could not find.
Shout out to my mom, because my mom got me this one from the video store, and I liked it so much that my mom claimed it lost and paid for it.
Aww.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I love your mother. I've thought about doing that when I was growing up. But
I thought about doing it too, and my dad wouldn't let me.
No, look at us with our honest parents.
She did that for a few. She did that for a few of my fairy tale theaters where they come in nondescript, clear or black cases with no artwork.
Oh, okay. Your mother's a good lady.
So you're the reason I couldn't find it, is what I'm hearing.
Well, unless you live in Mamaroneck, New York, then no, it's not. I did not affect you.
And also, while you've got me, I'll mention that in Australia, we never got The Little Mermaid on video. We never got
Oh,
The Princess Who Had Never Laughed
that's so
and Rip
sad.
Van Winkle. Yeah, they never released them. And I didn't even know that they were ever episodes until, the internet started to crank up a little bit and websites started to pop up with more information. And that's when, Australians started to learn more about fairy tale theatre.
A website popped up, you say?
Sometime in the late 90s, I think.
Yeah, I wonder whose website that might have been.
Is it still up?
It's still up. Okay, so how familiar were you with the original fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm? Eric?
I'm not super familiar. I do remember reading it probably when I was younger. I remember the cover in my head. I can see it right now.
Aw.
And yeah, and I do remember reading it, but I don't remember the details of it to compare it to my rewatch.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I know I read the original tale. I was a German major. I know I've read it in the original German, but it's so far back. I do not remember it that well. Fortunately, though, I think we've got someone who is very familiar with the fairy tale.
Yeah, I'll admit this is my favorite fairy tale. I've read it many times, many versions, and I also collect vintage fairy tale books. And I try and get every copy of Hansel and Gretel that I like. And
Oh, I
yeah,
love
so
that.
I'm in a good position to help guide you guys through the original tale. A little bit of background. It was collected by the Brothers Grimm and first published in 1812. While we're talking the original story, did you guys ever see the opera by Engelbert Humperdinck?
Yes, yes. I saw that when I was a kid in
Ah,
Detroit, actually.
I mention it only because a lot of the music from the opera is sampled throughout this episode. So I'll make a point whenever that music is featured to just point out when it's playing and identify the part of the opera that it's from.
I love that. I remember Canon Movie Tales version of Hansel and Gretel followed the opera pretty closely, and I think they even had some of the songs, but I don't remember
Yeah,
Fairy
a
Tale
lot of that.
Theater.
A lot of the music in the canon movie tales is definitely
Raise your
taken from
hand
the
and
opera.
clap, clap, clap.
That's the one.
That's the one.
So you do know the opera, but yeah, that premiered in 1893, and it's traditionally a Christmas opera. And I think, Eric, you said this episode premiered in December of 1983. So I feel that they were trying to play off the popularity of the Christmas opera with a Christmas episode of fairy tale theatre. I only say that as well because this episode was actually filmed in July of 1982, but it didn't premiere until December 1983.
Well, that makes sense. They had to go out on location. This was something else that sticks out in my mind about Hansel and Gretel. It's one of the few ones where they went out on location. Eric and I were talking, there's not a lot where they left the studio. We know they went to a beach for Little Mermaid. They went out into the woods for Hansel and Gretel, Beauty and the Beast, they went out, but not a
Yeah,
lot.
I always liked those ones more. I always used to think about Hansel and Gretel being the best in the fairy tale theatre series because it had such a theatrical look to the production. I felt like I was watching something that was really high quality, and then you'd see something else where it had the quaint but more stage production sets, and it would be jarring compared to what you just saw with Hansel and Gretel.
Oh, I could see that.
Mm.
So, starting our recap, the very first thing we have is our introduction by Shelley.
I love this introduction. They used it in many of the episodes. I remember this in Rumpelstiltskin. I remember this in The Frog Prince. I love her with the curly blonde hair and the blue dress and the flower crown and the very rehearsed opening lines of it where they were exactly the same for all those stories, and then just the very last line was different where she just talks about the one fairy tale that she's introducing. It's just brings back really good childhood memories for me. I just get like the warm and fuzzies when I see it.
Aw, I love that.
Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall. Welcome to Fairy Tale Theater. Today's tale is about a little boy and a girl who learn not to take candy from strangers. Joan Collins and Ricky Schroeder star in Hansel and Gretel.
Then after Shelley's intro, we roll the credits and we get some lovely background music over our credits.
No, this is the evening prayer from Act 2 of the opera.
That's very cool.
So beautiful background music.
Yeah, and it works. It helps set the scene. We get our cast, starting with Ricky Schroeder and then Joan Collins, Bridget Anderson, and our crew.
Now we've got director James Frawley. People will know him from directing the Muppet movie.
He did the Muppet movie?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Also worth noting, this was written by Patricia Resnick, and she had just finished writing the movie 9 to 5.
Really?
Yeah,
The
there was
Dolly
some talent
Parton?
behind this episode. Yeah, the Dolly Parton movie.
Wow. Very cool. Our scene opens with Joan Collins being the wicked stepmother to the two
Alexis.
little kids. Yes, she's definitely channeling Alexis from Dynasty here. Definitely. This was definitely her Dynasty character. What did I say during the rewatch? I'm like, this is Alexis goes rustic. So,
And then she's beating the kids with a broom. Now, I always looked at this and I always feel like the broom is foreshadowing the witch.
yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. I can totally see it.
And look, the children talk about their real mother and it quickly establishes the fact this is their stepmother.
Yeah, Hansel calls her mother and she goes,
I'm not your mother, and that is something to thank the Lord for.
Ouch.
So it's really reinforced that she is not their mother.
love that line. So good.
And we have to talk about Paul Dooley here as the woodcutter father and his, like I said, magnificent beard, which is fake but it really works.
It does work. It definitely works. And he's worried because he's not sure how he's going to feed his poor children and his wife, but he's more worried about the kids. They go to bed. The kids are sleeping in the loft and the parents are talking downstairs. And the stepmother is basically trying to talk her husband into child abandonment.
Yeah, she's got ideas. But she puts forward a really good argument,
I don't mean that we should leave them in the forest to, God forbid, die.
Well, I know, but you said take them in the...
What I meant was that we should leave them there for somebody else to find. Someone better off than we are. After all, nearly everyone is better off than we are. Someone who can feed them and take care of them and clothe them properly. A man of property, perhaps, with a two-room house and a chicken or goose to spare.
Deep in the forest? What would a man of property be doing deep in the forest?
Prince. Royalty hunts in the forest. A barren prince with no issue of his own who will love and take care of the little darlings.
They're going to be left in the woods and they're going to be found by a prince, clearly. And then they won't have to feel guilty about abandoning them. I think it's a really good idea. Sold.
What could possibly go wrong? I noticed the music changed in the background. When she first starts with her plan, it's kind of sinister music, and then it switches to a romantic theme when she starts talking about how the prince will be hunting and he'll adopt them, and Gretel will be a princess. The music changes to kind of help sell the story.
But she does make one more statement to really hammer this home. If they abandon the children, tomorrow we can start to make noise again. What does that mean, Emily?
Oh, we know what that means.
We know what that means, and I'm not explaining it to you.
Okay.
She also mentions, okay, so her plan is to get rid of the kids because, there are two more mouths to feed. But then she's like, oh, well, in time we can have more kids. The logic there is interesting.
Yeah.
They decide it's for the best that they abandon children in the woods. That's their plan. Fortunately, Hansel and Gretel overhear it, and Gretel basically asks Hansel to save them, and Hansel does. I give Hansel some credit here. He's a very enterprising young man.
It's a good idea, and it has merit.
So what does he do?
He steals outside, and he collects shiny pebbles that are shining in the moonlight with the knowledge that he can drop those on the way into the forest the next day, and then at night, they can follow this trail back.
Yeah, it's
Will
a
it
good
work?
plan. Will it work? Our next scene, we are on location again, and the stepmother packs up the family to go on a walk. And Hansel keeps kind of stopping to drop the pebbles. Now, I do remember this. I remember this from the fairy tale. This is one thing I remember very vividly from the fairy tale.
This is it. When he says,
I was just looking at my little white cat over there. He's sitting on the roof. He wants to say goodbye to me.
That isn't a cat, you stupid boy. It's simply the morning sun glinting on the chimney. Now come along before I take a switch to you.
Yeah, Hansel doesn't have a cat,
we haven't seen a cat, let alone a white cat.
let alone a white cat that sits on roofs.